Welcome back to Alpine Garage Sports. Folks, we are back in the garage again. I am your host, Chris, and today we're talking about realignment. Now, I'm not going to bore you on this one. Colorado has gone to the Big 12. We know that. They're going to be there in 2024, so not a huge deal as far as I'm concerned because I wanted to be here. Been talking about it for months, and I'm glad we're here. But we're not done yet, and that's what the point of this video is that we're only at 13 teams right now. And although a lot of you are reaching out and you said the one reason why people didn't want to go to the Big 12 was because they thought the games would be a little more boring than they were in the Pac-12. And that may be true compared to this year because we have USC on our docket, we have Oregon on our docket, we have a bunch of big in-conference games that really look like they're going to be awesome games. This season is not going to be replicated. I will guarantee you that. This season will go down in Colorado history as the greatest season in all of Colorado football. I'm going to say that right now. The excitement Coach Prime brings, the Pac-12 getting ready to self-destruct, and all of the teams being really good, and as much talent as there is in the Pac-12 this year, it's just going to be unbelievable that we are going into our first season in the last season of the Pac-12 as we know it. Pete Thamel from ESPN came out with an article that somewhat reinforced some of the things that I were thinking. So I thought, you know what, let's talk about this for a second. So we're going into the Big 12 next year. We're going to be the 13th team. They really want at least 14 teams to kind of even things out. Arizona seems to be that team. They're the one team that has been talking to the Big 12 more than anybody else. Now, that said, they're also a powerhouse basketball school going into potentially a powerhouse basketball conference in the Big 12. So that stated, they have said they don't want to be the school that breaks apart the Pac-12. In my opinion, Colorado and UCLA already did that. People know what we're bringing to the Big 12 is a much bigger package than almost any other school. So that stated, that makes the Big 12 more attractive to these other schools. So although we know that Arizona doesn't want to come over and break apart the rest of the Pac-12, it has been stated by Pete Thamel and others that Arizona, Arizona State, and Utah are going to kind of band together in this. And there is a meeting this week. It was supposed to happen yesterday, and apparently it did, but there's not a lot of stuff coming out of it right now, where the Pac-12 is actually going to announce its media rights deal to the presidents and the athletic directors. And that turned out to be what we thought it was. It was going to be, apparently one of the better options is going to be Apple TV. It's going to be streaming, and it's going to be in like the $20-ish million range to 20, low 20s, let's say. And then there's going to be a kicker in there based on subscription increases. So if, everybody joins Apple TV and have a giant explosion possibly in subscriptions, then they get bonuses out of that. That's kind of what has been said. But we're still talking low 20s, if not 20 million. That's 10 million less than you get coming to the Big 12. Plus, there's also bonuses in the Big 12, and we won't get into that. But that stated, Pete Thamel is saying that it could be a group thing. So if Arizona decides to jump, which it already has kind of shown a propensity to want to do that, the other two schools may join them. If they stay in the Pac-12, the other two schools may stay as well. But that stated, let's say they come, which I think is going to happen. The other two schools follow. We get Arizona, which is a powerhouse basketball school, and a rising football school. Arizona State, who is brand new, Kenny Dillingham, and all kinds of like five-star everything in that. It's going to be a big school this year. And going forward, going to be a lot better in recruiting. And then Utah, which is the Pac-12's baby for the past 2 years, the darling that won the conference. Coming over to the Big 12 all of a sudden makes a sexy conference way more sexier, and we're at 16 teams now. Now, that stated, there was an article last year that I remember reading, and I will find it. I haven't been able to find it yet, but it's out there still, where they were even talking about the same thing last year before the season ever started. What if the Big 12 went to 18 teams, and those 18 teams were the 18 teams we're talking about now, which is the 12 teams, which were the Pac-12, without OU and Texas. And then you have Colorado, Arizona, Arizona State, and Utah, okay, which makes 16. And then you have Oregon and Washington join too, because they obviously want to go to the B1G, but the B1G isn't ready for them at this point. So either they stay in the Pac-12 and they get basically a mediocre rights deal out of this whole thing, because after this season they're going to have to re-up somewhere, right? So they could either hold out and hope the B1G comes for them, or they could join the Big 12 and make it an 18-team league and get the best parts of the Pac-12, which is what everybody wanted to begin with. Everybody wanted the Pac-12 to, why are you leaving me? Why are you leaving me? I thought we were a family, We get the best parts of that, and we get the best parts of the Big 12, and we have an 18-team conference right now. And last year they were talking about what happens if it goes to 18 teams. We wouldn't split it into two. We would split it into three. So there'd be basically three subdivisions, they call them pods, where you'd have like an East pod, which is going to include, UCF and Cincinnati and West Virginia. And then who knows, maybe Houston and Baylor, or it could be the Kansas schools with Iowa State. Who knows what that Eastern would be. But then you have the Central, which Colorado would be most assuredly part of, with OSU and maybe even Kansas and Kansas State and those schools. And then you would have a Western pod, which is going to be Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, Oregon, Washington, and BYU. And then what they would do is they would play, out of their 12 games, they would play a 9-game conference schedule. 5 of those games would be in their pod. Okay, so the Eastern schools would play 5 out of the 6 teams in that pod that year. Then they would play 2 out of the Central pod, and they played 2 out of the Western pod. And then every year that would kind of mix up a little bit. You'd obviously have rivalries develop and, consistent schedules and that kind of thing. But that would be a 9-game in-conference schedule. You have 3 out-of-conference games. To me, that sounds super exciting. I love that idea. I think that would be great to play 5 in our Central and then play 2 out of the East and then play 2 out of the West and then have 3 non-conference games. That sounds super exciting. So that would be what an 18-team conference would look like with 3 pods. And I think that sounds super exciting. So I'm kind of hybriding some things I was thinking about from articles from last year and some things that Pete Thamel was saying in his new article, which I will publish down below. So the question is, does that sound exciting to you? Does a 14, 16, or 18-team conference sound more exciting to you? And do you think that the 3 schools from the 4 corner schools are going to come in? And if that is the case, that's going to absolutely devastate the Pac-12. Are Oregon and Washington going to jump in if they can? Okay, if they can work it out with the media rights companies that are creating this deal, if they're going to pay the extra $32 million per school. I mean, why wouldn't you with Washington and Oregon? I mean, if they came, I'm sure they would probably dump it out to get them in. And then once you have that, would they stay? Would all of those teams stay in, make an 18-team super conference that could potentially take over powerhouses like the SEC and the B1G, and maybe even the ACC as far as viewership and loyalty and powerhouse schools, recruiting, things like that? What would that do to have that super conference? It is possible. This is not a pie-in-the-sky kind of thing. We already said Colorado was going to come. Colorado came. Now we're saying Arizona's going to come, and Arizona's going to come, and if they do, they're bringing friends. And if they do, what are Washington and Oregon going to do just sitting on the toilet by themselves out in the Pac-12? They're not. I don't think that's a possibility. I think they're going to want to come, even if for a brief while until the B1G accepts them. I think this is where it comes from. And then we're going to let the other conferences come and try to get them. And that's how you make money. You bump up from 20 million to 31 million, and then you let the other schools, when those media rights deals come up with the B1G and the SEC, have them come after you now and bump from 31 up to 50 maybe. Who knows? That's how you build an athletic program. That's how you make money. I think this sounds super exciting. Give me your thoughts down below. We'll see you in the next video. If you haven't already heard, we coming.